I want to thank everyone for joining us on this aesthetic water cooler. A couple things I want to just throw out there. First of all, thank you, Edwin Marketing, for hosting this. As everyone knows, this is a live podcast, but there will be, it gets posted out there. I think the one from last week has been put out there. Is that correct, Lila?
Yes.
Okay. So people can listen to these in the past tense. We do encourage people, if you're serious about working on your business, I encourage people to try to do this during their business hours. So you spend your time with your family like I do in the evening hours. And I say that because I think physicians are so common, or it's so common for physicians to not take time to work on their business. They just respond to their business. And if you really want to be serious about this, one, you need to be proactive, set time aside to work on the business. And number two, you can't be just doing this in the evenings and taking away from your family. So in order to, one of the things we put together last month is that we said, we're going to have a contest, and it'll be at the end of the next podcast. I wanted to give everyone a couple of months to get themselves set up for it. And for anyone who is on the live podcast next month, we'll have a, I don't know how we're going to do this drawing, but by the end of it, we'll do a drawing for anyone to get kind of one-on-one 45 minutes of my time, pick my brain coaching, whatever you want to call it. And we'll do that. Just encourage people to get on the podcast. So next month, I have a variety of titles, and you'll see these kind of mixed up with time because some of them in my mind go in better order sequentially versus what has been put out there. I think the last one was on, the importance of how to build. What was it now, Lila? How to build life.
Episode 3 was developing multiple profit centers.
Right, the last one, but the next one, what was coming up, what was scheduled to be what?
Oh, the one for the 25th is the aesthetics of living the life you want.
Right, and that's a very important topic because let's face it, what good is all the, when you talk about right now, somewhere around 60% of physicians are feeling, quote, burned out. To me, that's a really important topic, and I feel blessed that I am out of my building typically most days by 5 p.m. And I am not someone who's taking away from my family. Again, if you don't take care of your relationships, they will not exist down the road. So the next episode is actually something I think is sequentially makes more sense. I call it the leadership imperative. Developing extraordinary business skills for the healthcare entrepreneur. And why that's so important is that so many businesses get started. If you think about those of us who go into the non-entrepreneurial side of what we're doing, we have a certain type of appetite for that. Well, in a lot of companies, once a company gets up and successful, the first thing they do is they fire the entrepreneur. They get rid of the visionary, if you will, and they bring on a real seasoned business person who can run the business. And so I think learning those skills from the very beginning are important so that we don't become irrelevant, so that we can be an entrepreneur, but we can also make, again, entrepreneurs are kind of known as being a little bit of a hot mess, batting at shiny objects, as I call it. Some of them are expensive and they all have ADD, or we all have ADD, right? So it's important to learn how to develop those skills. So that's going to be next month's April 25th. I do want to encourage anyone who has questions. There is one question that came in this past week, and the question was, how do you add a plastic surgeon to your practice? And I could talk about this for an hour, but we're going to answer it in the segment that we have, and I talk about specific profit centers this week. So this week's topic is what I call, profit centers, the nitty-gritty of running multiple profit centers. And the reason I chose to add this in is after last week, I did an overview, but I really felt it's important to dissect a number of these one by one and tell you all some of the things that I've lost on and some of the specifics on things that I have won on, because as I always say, there's no such thing as failing. All we can do is learn and grow. But one of my other favorite sayings is history does repeat itself. So if we learn from each other and learn from the lessons that and the bad some of the bad decisions we've made, we are likely to prevent some of those in the future. So I think it's important for us to go through, for me to go through some of these specific things. And I look back at my career, and I probably had over 50, at least 50, excluding just technology, because you could say each laser is a profit center. But I'm talking about real profit centers that were separate LLCs or businesses. I probably have 50 of them. And there are a number of topics or categories where I've had those that have failed, and I've had those that have I've won on, and I'm going to go through some of these and some of the lessons. So one thing I want to again, so if you would have some questions, send them there to us today. Some of them I won't be able to answer. The ones that are most important, we're going to bring into the conversation next week. But if I can get to some of them, I will answer some of them today, because there are a lot of things I did want to go over. So who is this podcast for? I want to answer that question. And I would, first of all, I'm so appreciative that people are listening to this. I can't believe how it's growing and it's taken off. We've gained a lot of traction over the past, really just a few months that we started this. I am a facial plastic surgeon. Typically, facial plastic surgeons tend to relate to me a little bit more. And I've been through what they've all been through. Although, quite frankly, any area of aesthetic medicine, fee-for-service medicine, or any entrepreneur, I mean, even like a physical therapist who's trying to scale up and grow their business can relate to this podcast. And I'll tell you what, not only that, any small business person, because what I did is I became a student of business and studied the heck out of everything I could possibly read. All of the principles I'm talking about, not only in this podcast, but in any podcast, could someone who is in any type of business relate to. I have a business development group. We have 8 of us. We've all been together for about 12 years. When we first got together to help solve our problems as board of directors, and we have a structured way we go through this, I thought to myself, one guy owns a big RV business and pools and others, an insurance guy, and other guys. We had 2 venture capitalists who started a company, sold their company for over 9 figures in the past 12 years. Bottom line is, it's all the same stuff. It's all the same stuff, folks. So healthcare or physician type or healthcare entrepreneurs or maybe relate to me a little bit more, but this is all basic business stuff. And that's why I think next week we're going to talk about, developing a business person. So I'm going to go ahead and get started now with, what I call, let me just check my notes, see if there's anything else I wanted to mention on this. Oh yeah, just finally, any questions, of course, send them through to us either now or on the link during the week. And please, share this with anyone that you think it might benefit from this podcast. Whether they are, a plastic surgeon, facial plastic surgeon, aesthetic dermatologist, procedural type physician. And we appreciate that. I think that's what allows this to be posted for free. And so in the more momentum we have, the easier it is for Equa Marketing to support it, which we're very, very grateful for them doing so. Anyway, so let's talk about, profit centers and specific things. And I want to just, again, I'm going to, hit, if you want to learn, you learn by hearing, by repetition, right? You learn by hearing things over and over again. And so one of the things that I think is worth getting out there, because I've coached a lot of people over the years and mentored a lot of people, and they ask my opinion, and I don't give out advice, by the way. I tell people what I would do. I don't say, here's what I do. I say, here's what I would do. I don't tell, here's what you should do, because we all have different risk tolerances, right? But I've had many people ask me and say, well, yeah, but this. Here's the bottom line, man, there's risk in all this stuff. And if I remember one of my fellows years ago said to me, Dr. Williams, I can't believe it. Like, I look around and you sign personally for everything here. I'm like, yeah, don't remind me. Because it's very nerve-wracking at times, and no one likes to lose money. And if you don't have the stomach, for losing a few bucks, you best not go down this road, because you will lose here and there, but that's how you get better at making, that's how you get better at making better decisions, quite frankly, is by making some tough decisions and, eating what the decision you made. And you learn from that. And that's why I say you never grow if you don't take those leaps and bounds. And I think especially people that jump out and do it early on, learn quickly. And I think you get up the learning curve more quickly. So, risk is a very important part of this conversation, whether we're buying a laser, whether we're putting a building in. We need to look at the risk piece and find out what is and we also need to have the intestinal fortitude when we are experiencing a significant loss, to really roll up our sleeves and make some tough decisions. Do I cut my losses and eat the debt? Do I double down and work hard? But blending that income in with the other income that you have is not a good answer, because you could end up losing over here and you're making somewhere else, and you're not even aware that you're losing money. So a couple things, and then finally, it's important to become, if you're going to go down this road, look at your risk tolerance. But then also, am I willing to become a student of business, as I mentioned last month? If you're genuinely not interested in doing so, and you're not looking to become a business person, then maybe, if you're not interested in it, don't do it just to make money, because you're going to lose money. I can guarantee you, if you do not make this a deliberate effort. My goal in becoming, again, as a business leader, is anytime I find an activity that someone can do 80% as well as I can do, it's time to hand it off and get to the next level. And so the answer isn't just working harder. So let's talk about one of the profit centers I had. I'm going to talk about, at a skincare company, medical spa, skincare services in general, because that a lot of people have in their practices. I'm going to hit on adding physicians to your practice, talk about one of my really bad experiences, and then lessons I've learned and what I found works. Surgery centers, what's the skinny on surgery centers? Adding a hair transplant center, real estate development, which I've had a ton of experience with. Adding technology, creating a destination practice, and other ventures, things I've learned, lessons I've learned. So let's go ahead and get started with profit center. So on the area of adding a skincare company. So in 1992, I thought it was a really good idea to start a skincare company. And why did I think that was a good idea? Well, I thought to myself, in my community, if I were to get a really good skincare company and be able to offer it at a rate or a product sales price point that was superior to what was out there, allowed people to, private label, then I would be able to get people to know who I was as a facial plastic surgeon, not only in my community, but in the, medical community in general. I mean, our society is pretty tight, but as word gets out there, I thought it would be a good idea. So I started to really research it. I learned what it took to silk screen a label. And we got the company trademarked, and what we called it Skin Scripts, which was really cool. Nobody had that name at the time. In fact, I found a company on the West Coast. They made an awesome glycolic acid product. So we really only had a few different products. We had I think a 4% and 10% AHA, and we had a cleanser and a toner, and then we eventually added an eye gel. And so we started the company. And what I found after a year or so in practice, there were a couple of things. I realized that I needed to hire some people. I needed to spend some more time on this whole thing. And so there was a woman who is an esthetician, and she had the entire region locked up with her aesthetic services. And I thought to myself, she had sent me a few patients, and I said, well, if I kind of get in business with her and work something out with her, then, she'll be loyal to me. First of all, I knew she had a huge business. She'll use the product, right? So we did just that. And what I did was, she really didn't have the capital. I had, some of the capital at that point. And I said, look, well, why don't we go in this together? I mean, maybe in the very beginning, we each threw up $2,500 or something. And it finally got to a point where I realized that we're getting sales and she was buying some, and I knew we needed more capital. So I said, look, she didn't have the money, and I knew we needed probably $100,000. This is 1992, back then. So I knew we needed money to drive this forward. Well, how was I going to do it? I figured, well, we'll sell shares in the company. We sell 40% of it. I put up a bunch of money, and I got 4 other people to put up like 25,000. But moving forward, the investors didn't want her at 50% and me. They wanted it equitable somehow. So, we came up with a structure whereby, I think with her 40%, that's right, they all bought her 40% out. So she owned 10, they each owned 10. I had 50. And then, moving forward, what I did is I found someone to run it. Well, 2 years later, and so 2 years later, what happened was the person who ran it basically used it as their personal spending account, ran it into the dirt, burned through $100,000, and we were left with next to nothing. And so, lessons that I learned from that. One, and the woman who, by the way, she got into the company for $2,500. She never had to put up any more money, and most of us put up tens of thousands of dollars. It was all done very equitable. LLC set up the whole 9 yards. At the end of at the end of the term, company went bankrupt. Well, bankrupt. We closed it. We didn't owe anyone any money. And I went back and found out how this woman who was running the company was basically wasting the money and using, she was supposed to buy into the company. She never came up with any of the money. And we ended up closing it. So what I learned from that was it was a huge distraction from where I should have been spending time on my business. Number one. Number two, your local competitors, dermatologists, are not going to buy from you. You're smoking crack if you think the competitors are going to buy from you. I thought, this is great. I built some loyalty. We built friendships. I built my referral. That didn't work out. The woman who was a minority investor, I think she owned 10% of the time. I never put up more than $2,500. Kind of got bought out. Was sour because she thought that I should have done a better job, and it was kind of out of my hand. At that point, we turned it over to someone to run the company. And this is a woman who she was one of my biggest referrals at that point when I first went practice. And, and she never ended up really using a lot of the product. She used it in the beginning, but she loved Murad at the time. So just because, and I learned this with the surgery center, just because people put up their heart, put up some money and invested, or even if they don't put up a lot of money, but they stand to benefit from the company growing, don't make the same assumptions thinking that they're going to, become your biggest customer. Or like we've had this in the surgery center, someone invests in the surgery center and they end up not really using it. And you're like, that doesn't make sense. They could potentially benefit. So, lessons I learned there, it was a distraction. I was too trusting. I hired a person to run the company. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Now we're fanatical about who we hire. I don't think she was a crook. I just think she was a hot mess, and she, ran through our company's reserves. And then the big thing was the unintended consequences. I ended up with a sour relationship that was one of my best referrals because, she kind of felt, that, I should have done a better job running the company. And, from then on, she never referred me a patient. In fact, she used to send people out of town, and so I learned a couple lessons there. Now, going down the road, I've had fellows of mine, and I won't use names because, they say something about they're going to start a skincare company. I'm like, don't, and the same reasons, I say it's a distraction. And I mean, you can't compete with the skincare lines out there. I mean, and now especially with Allergan, and their line and the others that are out there, how the heck can we possibly compete Yet one of my dear friends and colleagues, about 5 years ago, started a new line, of course, and I said to him, "Don't do it. I'm telling you, don't do it." By the time when you look at even just the packaging, the cost of packaging and marketing, something like 5 or 6% of the product of the cost going out retail is the product. Most of it is packaging and marketing and all that other stuff. And sure enough, a couple years later, I ran into one of my former fellows and buddies, and he said to me, "Yeah, you're probably right." He goes, "I lost $250,000 on that last year." So he lost over $250,000 trying to grow his product line. And I know he's still trying to grow it. And to me, what a waste of effort. So if you're thinking about a skincare company, don't do it. It doesn't make sense. And like I said, the biggest thing for me is just the distraction. The time it took away from what I could have been doing and developing something that was part of my core. So that was lesson number 2, or lesson number 1, the skincare company. The next one is skincare services. Now, as of 2019, a lot of people who are listening to me have skincare services, right? Well, in 1992, very few or nobody did. In fact, I approached a dermatologist. I was talking to him about cosmetic skincare, and I remember him saying to me, he goes, "Ed, I don't know what you're talking about, cosmetic skincare. That doesn't make sense to me. I'm a dermatologist. I've never heard of that." I'm like, "Okay, well," but I had this vision. I thought that, if we're going to have surgery, we should be take care of aging skin, right? I mean, we've all been trained in chemical peel and using Retin-A and that type of thing. So I wanted to bring it into my practice. And so it was right about the time that I started a skincare line. What I did is, at the time, just about that time, estheticians were getting licensed, and it was new. So what I did is I sent out the letter to all the skincare places, and I tried to invite them to my office. I'm thinking, well, I'm going to have skincare services, and I'm going to have them in my office. I'm going to carry products. And what I did is I actually did what a lot of us do now, is I allocated some space that people could work out of. And I figured, well, I'm going to find the best one and I'm going to hire them. And I'm going to bring them on because, it's another potential profit center here, right? So I'll bring them on and then we're going to carry products. And I was trying to figure out the math. What I learned over the next several years is that it's really hard to make money on aesthetic service, the service piece of it, not the product piece of it, but the service piece of it. And most of the estheticians that I had, between 1992 and 2005, I had 3 of the best estheticians that had previously been at Canyon Ranch, which is a world-class organization, but they were down in Massachusetts, and I was able to recruit them, and they were with me for about 10 years. So it's not like, I had a lot of turnover in the aesthetic schools. Many of the folks going for the training, it's a 6-8 month thing. They get a certificate, and they are told that, doctors don't know a lot about skin. Retin-A is carcinogenic, and nurses know lessons about skin than doctors do. And quite frankly, that's what they were even telling, some of my patients. I would get comments from our estheticians that, you quote, don't support us enough. And yet, they weren't, I wasn't in the business to be growing their skincare, even though we had a performance model set up. But a lot of times what's taught in the aesthetic schools is that, these folks can get out and expect to make, $80,000, $90,000 a year, something like that. And as you know, registered nurses, it's 18 months, 2-year certificate, 4-year degree, to expect that after a 6-month certification, it's a hard thing to justify. And quite frankly, I know because there's one in our area, a huge business of training estheticians, and they charge them, I think, $15,000 for a 6-month program. They get them financing. Who's making money is the aesthetic schools, and so they started pumping out a lot of estheticians. So when you look in any one area, I mean, we probably got 5 or 6 estheticians who work for us that they're not working as estheticians, but they couldn't find jobs eventually. So I think they put out so many of them. And at the end of 10 years, and the other thing is when you do cost accounting, like I've looked at the P&L of a lot of our colleagues who have aesthetic skincare services. And when you look at you do cost accounting on the space that they're giving up, okay, to do facials, and some of the other aesthetic services. Even some of my colleagues that do pedicures and stuff. Folks, they're not making money. I can tell you without question, I've looked at the numbers, they are not making money on the services. Many of them are borderline making money on the products. And by the way, you're competing. I have a woman who has a 30,000 square foot day spa in our area. She happens to be a friend who've done a facelift on her a couple of times over the 25 years. World-class operation that is written up in Day Spa magazine. How the heck can I compete with that? You know, I mean, and on top of that, the intangible benefit, a loss that is, of offending the estheticians in the area. So at the end by 2005, I don't want to say came up with an excuse, but I had a conversation with our estheticians who had been there for years. And I finally said, look, we need the space. And from that day forward, I have never had an esthetician on staff. I work with registered nurses, and I'm going to tell you why. It's a different culture. And I'm sorry if I'm offending, I know there's some outstanding estheticians out there, but I'm sorry if I'm offending someone on the phone call or on the podcast. But they have been, at least my experience, the first group to come to me. They won't deal with the office manager. They have to deal with me. They're the first group that doesn't call me Dr. Williams. They call me Ed. Not that I have a problem, but they're the first group that doesn't think they're getting treated fairly. They're the first group that wants a tip. And they're the first group that will talk to me about, is there a way we can, I sent you something, what can I get spiffed somehow? We can't do that. That's unethical. Sharing revenue with a non-physician is called a fee split. So the lesson I learned, and I got up on the podium in 2005 at a New York meeting, and I said, I finally got to come to the conclusion that I can't make money with estheticians. I can make money with product and registered nurses, and they follow my lead, and there's a mutual respect there, and it's part of our culture and what we've learned. And I had one of the consultants come up in the back of the room and say, Dr. Williams, you are dead right on. I've looked at more P&Ls of practices that are losing money. So to me, aesthetic services, I think, have a role. I know I have had people that I've mentored, and I've looked at the P&L, and they think they're making money on their aesthetic services, and they're not. So, but I would just say, if you are doing facials and those sorts of things and have estheticians, you really need to look at your numbers. Cost accounting, as I mentioned last week, look at the cost of the square footage of the room, the liability, heat, light, electric, all that stuff, and determine if you're really making money on that activity. I had someone look to take on another 2,500 square feet because they've, quote, outgrown their space, and when in reality, they wanted to add 2 or 3 more rooms for estheticians. I'm like, what are you, crazy? I mean, if you're going to do that and you're injecting Botox in those rooms, now it's a different story. But to be doing facials and justify that, and have one more employee. And by the way, you got to be careful nowadays. The Department of Labor, it's very easy to be, for them to be categorized as an employee, and now they need employee benefits and retirement and all that other stuff. So to me, that was something I learned, over the course of that time. And again, colleagues of mine where, we look over the numbers and do go to that direction. They say, I think you're right. And to me, I'll work with registered nurses all day, and that's what we do. It's a little more expensive, but it's something I can sleep at night. And I don't want to get into New York State, but New York State has some other things that make it challenging because if an esthetician works for you, they have to be licensed under the Department of Health, which, by the way, there's no such licensure. So you might as well have the person answering the phone provide the services. So complicated topic, but I learned a lot having skincare services. Doesn't mean that we don't do peels, light peels, and have good skincare products and that type of thing. But we don't do facials and we don't have estheticians. So let's talk about another. I'll tell a story about this. Another topic is what I call medical spa. Again, if it hasn't become obvious already, I don't like the term medical spa because we don't provide spa services. And, I've heard like people say, well, yeah, but it's good for the relationship. Don't get me wrong. We provide skincare services, but we do it at the medical level, meaning we have MDs and registered nurses. Really, registered nurses provide most of the care, and we do sell products that incorporate retin-A, compounded retin-A, and that type of thing. But let's just talk about, that's why we don't like to call it medical spa. We call ours a Rejuvicenter. We do anything a physician would do, and I don't want to compete with the estheticians in the area. And that's just a decision that I made because I think that makes more business sense for us. I kind of fell upon this in 2003 with our space. We had a space that was fit out about 3,000 square feet. And there was a company called Gimbal Vision. And Gimbal Vision was a laser vision eye center. And they took space in my building. And when they took space in the building, they locked it up for 5 years. Did a big build out. And 18 months into it, they went belly up. So here I am I'm holding this in my hand. We have a 21,000 square foot building. I have this 3,000 square feet. It's all custom built and made for a laser vision center. What am I going to do with this space? Well, quite frankly, it sat there for about 4 months, 5 months, empty. And I was paying the mortgage on the building. So it was a void. But I tried to think of what I can do with it. And this was really, think about this. This was in 1990, right around 2000, before people had medical, quote, medi spas or anything like that. And I was starting to work with injectables. We had used Botox a little bit in the late 90s and early 2000 timeframe, but really hadn't done tons of it. I started doing more and more of it, and I was running around and honestly working myself to death. There was Radiance, if those of you who remember, we didn't really have a lot of the HAs. And I had a woman who was a nurse who actually is still with us. Linda, she's one of our registered nurses. She's been with me. Well, so let's see, she came on full time, I think in 2004, which is 15 years, and we just celebrated her 15 year with us. So she's a nurse injector now, but at the time, I started to teach her how to do some peels and in the office, and I taught her how to do some Botox. And I thought to myself, well, maybe we should separate the space and try to grow that. And, that's what we did. And, we had a degree of success for a couple of years, and we, added, and the numbers started to grow. And I said, well, I'm doing good with this one. Let's do another one. So we went up to Saratoga Springs, which is about 25 miles north of here. I figured, well, if it worked in one place, it'll work in another. And we opened another, quote, Rejuvicenter. And after 2 years, we were in the hole, about $250,000. I thought it was staffed well. I thought we didn't overdo technology. We had laser hair removal, I think, and we had a pulse dye laser up there as well. And we trained our staff to be up there. And what I did at the end of 2 years is I looked at a line of best fit for our growth, and I looked at the line of best fit, or where we're paying down our debt and where they would cross, our break-even point. And we're out another 2 years from that. And I decided to pull the plug and, negotiate the back end of the lease. Did that successfully. And you can do that. There's a method for doing that. And I spoke to the bank, and we turned it into a note, and I paid it off. And I think that I earned a lot of respect for the bank by, pulling the plug on it and just getting out. We were, I learned a couple lessons from that, and I think this has now been borne out in the data you'll see around the country with, medical spas. One was I didn't appreciate the importance of having a respected MD in the entity. And that's why if you look at so many of these med spas around the country, many of them are either breaking even or going bankrupt. It is important to have a well-respected physician associated with it. That was one of the big differences we had in Latham, which is where our main office was, compared to Saratoga. We didn't have well-respected. So just because you have a degree of success in one doesn't mean you're going to have a degree of success in another. And that now has been, like I said, borne out. The medical spas that tend to do well have a well-respected physician associated with them in their locale. So that was a lesson I learned there. The other is just Saratoga is a little bit more of a provincial town, and I think we were just ahead of our time. Kind of like when we used to go to the health fairs, and going to the health fairs, and people say, well, Botox, I'll never use that. That's poison. That was only 12, 15 years ago. We were ahead of our time. And I think we were ahead of our time in Saratoga and somewhat of a, provincial town. And so, we had one center that we're now in the top 1% of the country as far as revenue and profitability. And we failed miserably at another one. I think that right now that area is probably ripe again for another one. We were just maybe ahead of our time. But, sometimes you can do what you think is market research and write a business plan, and it doesn't always work. So, I learned a couple lessons with that. And so in the interest of moving on and staying on time here a little bit, adding physicians is a common question I get at a lot of the meetings. How do I add a doc? How do I add someone in? And so I think you got to ask yourself, why do I want to add another physician? Well, and who do I want to add? Do I add plastic surgeon, facial plastic surgeon, dermatologist, and why? I think the most common reason I hear is that, camaraderie and share overhead and, potential for making products, share my operating rooms. And these are all good reasons, but there are also risks. And then I will tell you, I had a 6-figure loss by adding the wrong person. And I learned a few lessons from that. So my story was around 1990s. By the way, right now I have a plastic surgeon who's been with me for 12 years. We're good friends. We're partners on a couple things, and he's got equity in surgery center in the practice. And so we're kind of golden handcuffed together. And I have a former fellow who's joined us, and he's part of our golden handcuff too. We all basically sign non-competes to the businesses. So we're either we all leave the area, or we leave, or we're stuck here. So I feel comfortable that we've done this right. And I'll get back to how I did that. But my first was in 1996 for the same reason that everyone approaches me and says, how do you add a plastic surgeon? How do you add, I'm a busy facial plastic surgeon, and how do I add a plastic surgeon? And, I get the same questions over and over when I'm at the meetings. And, unlike most medical practices, a lot of medical practices will add someone because they are able to, quote, share overhead and share call. Well, if you're a well-respected facial plastic surgeon and your patients are well cared for, and you're not getting beat up with phone calls every night, so you don't need to, quote, share call so much. So then you say, okay, well, yeah, but the other thing is I don't want to lose patients. I send someone for a breast aug and then they don't come back. And I get that. So how do I keep everybody in the fold? Well, this is what I was experiencing. So I ran into, I'd heard of a guy who was unhappy working for another plastic surgeon. And this guy was a class act, and he was a good surgeon. And he was not really a risk taker, which to me was a big plus. He wasn't a risk taker. He also really needed some kind of a guarantee, which, I wasn't I really didn't want to put myself in that kind of position because so what I did, and I think I'll be honest, my mistake, and this is the mistake I've seen other people make, is I wanted it too much. I wanted the relationship to work. And because I saw the potential, and I've heard of well, at the time I didn't hear of other people, but now we know of good relationships at work. Um, and I had something to offer him. I mean, I had a really nice practice, but he at the time he wanted to do some facial stuff, but he really wasn't genuinely interested in like doing rhinoplasty or really growing a facelift practice. So we entered into this thing. He came on, and I really worked hard. I marketed and advertised him. We set up separate phone lines so we have our different names. And I had the overhead piece all set up, and that was done fairly. And 18 months later, we went out for a drink, and he said, I'm going to leave. I'm not really, happy. My business hasn't developed. And I remember talking to one of my patient care coordinators, and she says, Dr. Williams, Dr. So-and-so's phone just doesn't ring. I mean, and I used to talk to him in the office, and I would say to him, and I'm going to make believe his name was Jim. But I say, Jim, at the time, we were doing a lot of insurance work. I talked to him about, when you stop at the ER, go to every ER in the morning on the way in and every ER on the way out, stop by, shake their hands and tell them who you are. And, you're around. And I know, sometimes I'm not on call, but, if for some reason, you can't get through to whoever, just give me a call. And he said to me, well, Ed, that's not going to work. I mean, I'm not on call. And I said, trust me, being available and just, acting like you don't really care about, if someone's got the resources to cover your insurance, just take care of them. And, at the end of, it was $100,000 plus loss for me because I marketed for him. We even started like yellow page ads, all that crap. And the reality is he didn't have my same work ethic. And that was a lesson learned to me. My current partner works his ass off, and so do I. We all do. And I would never consider what he would do. I remember him coming to the office, and I go back in his office, and he would be back there with a journal and a calculator and on a scratch pad. And, what he was trying to figure out is, he was looking to upgrade his BMW, and he wanted to figure out, what his payments needed to be or some nonsense like that, instead of going out and figure out where to get the patients from. And, he was fed in this other practice, and he was comfortable. He ultimately ended up leaving the area altogether. But, he didn't have the drive, and I wanted it too much. And that was the lesson that I learned there. My current partner, when we got together, he was in New York. I was dripping on him, trying to recruit him, a little bit. And he came and we talked, and I said, here's the deal, Alan. Look, I know it's here. I know it's here. You'll have a surgery center to work with. I'll make you a partner. I'll show you the books. And I did. I opened the books up to him. I say, here's, and he came on, and we've been together ever since. And so why is this one been successful? One, I told him, look, what I have here is not broken. Okay. What I have here is not broken. If you can, get over the ego thing and realize that there's an opportunity here, you just, everything I do is going to be what I think makes good business sense and what is fair. If you can trust me on that, it's going to work. And at the end of 2 years, I'll give you the ability to buy stock based on what you add. So in other words, I'm not going to, I think a lot of partnerships fail because this is not clearly laid out from the beginning. Day one, I could show them the books. Day one, I could show them our operating agreement, our accounting. And so, that's a real important thing, is to make sure you're able to show them day one, not 2 years later when it's a contentious discussion. And, well, how do you value the practice? And, well, we're going to back charge you for this. And that's when these things fall apart. So my lesson learned here, one, you have to create, if you really want to bring someone on, you've got to create something of value that's going to attract them. I needed to be able to offer him something that, he doesn't have, and would take him at least 10 to 15 years. And then create a fair environment for him to win. My partner has stock in surgery center, his stock in the practice. His return on investment, his dividends are thrown about 42, 43%. And for him, was that a good deal? And the question, or the answer is absolutely. So, it was well thought out, and that was what I didn't have on the first one. You can't just throw this stuff together. You have to have it thought out from the very, very beginning. Yeah, I mean, and as I mentioned, you got to create some real value for them. And we have non-competes on each other. I couldn't leave and compete with the business, and neither can he. And we live by that. So let's move on to another topic, which is surgery centers. In 1992, I had a little office-based surgery center, and I worked out of that. It was not an accredited facility, but that was very early in the very early years. And I was putting this building in, and at the time, one of my good colleagues and friends, Vito Quatella, said to me, he's like, "Ed, you're putting a surgery center." He goes, "Just bite the bullet and put it in a Triple HC accredited facility and with Medicare approval." And I did that. We make the surgery center work for us. It's probably, as I tell my friends and colleagues, you got to look at the benefits. You got to look at the shortcomings. And in the since we incorporated in 1999, so it's been almost 20 years now. I've had that surgery center. In the past 20 years, I've been in the red for periods of time, 3 different times, including this past January, February. We just, we had a little bit of a slow spell there, and now we have a huge, we have a volume, and which means you have operating expenses and skilled nursing staff and anesthesia commitments. I've lost more sleep over my surgery center than anything else I've ever done. Lessons to be learned. Depending on the state you live in. I know some friends who are in different states, and they're rocking it with their surgery center because their insurance, they're out of network and that type of thing. But if you're in a single specialty plastics surgery center, it's tough to make money. We certainly don't make money on our cosmetic cases, but there are huge intangible benefits. I can do more. I am more efficient. If I do a 10-hour day in the surgery center down there, it's what some people generate in a week or 2 for that matter. So, we can go up and down the stairs, and you talk about economy of scale. You talk about all those things. There are huge benefits. Patients come here knowing that you have a surgery center, it's private. That's a big benefit. It's not to be confused, because I have colleagues that have dissuaded from putting a surgery center in, they just ignore me, but it's not to be confused with the 4-room orthopedic surgery center. They are literally printing money, guys. They have one anesthesiologist supervising 4 CRNAs. They're making money there. Their cases all last an hour, hour and a half. They're pumping huge numbers, and orthopedic surgery has always done a really good job at negotiating for high reimbursement. It's a struggle that we have in our area, surgery centers, especially the smaller ones. So, would I do it again? I don't know the answer to that. I probably would. If someone were to approach me now and say, "What should I do?" I would say, put it in a 1-room, Triple HC accredited facility. I would not go for Medicare approval. I mean, like I said, we're kind of like, we're like pregnant now. We can't, and we have been for many years, but it's running a surgery center is a big challenge. And I can go story after story, anesthesia charges, commitments. It's anesthesia doesn't want to hear you had a half day on whatever they all want to be paid. And depending on your market, you really don't have room for, negotiation with them. Hair transplant center is another profit center that I had. 1993, I did my first hair transplant. I'd never really seen one. I called a buddy of mine who was at the McCullough Clinic, and he was training with Danny Russo, and I figured, well, he can talk me through it. I booked a case, and then I ended up figuring out how to do it. It was we were just starting to really experiment with smaller grafts, 1 and 1 millimeter grafts back then. And a gentleman approached me through a mutual friend who had a clinic. He actually had not hair club, I think it was hair club, hair loss club, whatever. He had about 119 of these throughout the country. And he asked me if I want to go open up a clinic in Kansas City with him. So I was starting to do, I had maybe doing 1 to 3 or 4 a month at that time, once we get up to about 94, 95, 1994, 95. And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to get into this thing and we're going to blow it out. He's got all these people feeding it. He did hair replacement, which are basically hair pieces, but there were a lot of people looking to have the hairlines refined on the front end, because if you remember, most of these hair pieces had an abrupt transition between scalp and the forehead. So we all put up money. We opened this clinic out in Kansas City. And once a month, my current wife, we were dating at the time, and she put up with this, but once a month we would, I would put a full weekend. We'd get on a plane late Friday afternoon. We'd fly out to Kansas City and do hair transplants all weekend, once a month. We had staff out there. I had a lot more energy, I guess, than I do now. And we ran this for a couple, 2.5 years or so. Finally, we got ourselves about $200,000 in the hole. I finally worked it back to zero, and then I said, "Guys, I'm out." That was a failure. The lesson I learned is if you got to do something, you got to do it, right under your nose. You can't try to do a remote location and scale up a clinic like that. I didn't, from a business point of view, leadership point of view, have control of the operation, and I was naive, thinking we could do that. Fast forward, we, by around 2002, 2003, I was doing, 1 to 2 hair transplants a week. And at that time, I decided that, well, we're going to bring someone in and have them maybe do some of the hair transplant. I'll be honest, I wasn't passionate about it. And I think that's one of the reasons it never really took off. Although I think we did pretty good work. We were just starting to experiment with the follicular unit grafting. And, it kind of dwindled down to nothing. About 2 years ago, we we bought Saratoga Hair Transplant Center. And the lesson learned there, where we won at it is I brought on our former fellow, who was a terrific person, terrific surgeon. And when we took over Saratoga, it was with the intention of Dr. Beener, who's a senior guy and one of the past presidents of the ISHRS. The guy was a world-class guy. He already had a revenue stream. He already had a track record. And that's why we have been successful. And we put together an arrangement for him when we bought his practice that is very appealing to him, because now the problem with hair transplant is the barrier to entry is very high. You just don't throw up a clinic. You've got techs, whether you're doing NeoGraft or some of the other high tech, and it takes a year or two to see results. So, trying to get before and afters and all those type of things that I experienced as I was spitting and sputtering with hair transplant for years, we solved that problem because we took over a clinic that already had all of that and had a reputation. But the thing that has worked well with this is that when we acquired the clinic, Dr. Beener could stay on, and he could work 2 days a week, and he could take off for a week or two. You can't. And what he was struggling with at the time, he's 72 years old. He's been there, done it, world-class guy. What he was struggling with is he wanted to just take a week or two off, and he couldn't provide the salaries for consistent staff. So he was having some struggles with his staffing. And so, what did I learn there? What were the lessons learned there? One is, whenever you have a business with a high barrier to entry, as I call it, you got to be all in. And that is why so many people do have a hard time getting hair transplant off the ground. Even though I did a case here and did a case there, I was not all in, and I wasn't passionate about it. And then two, if you're going to go down that, you're going to go down that road, you've got to be passionate about it, because it didn't work for me. I never really got out of the gates. I looked at it as an opportunity. I mean, if I was being honest, I didn't love sticking grafts, but I mean, our current partner, Dr. Slaughter, I talked to him the other day. He goes, honestly, he goes, I love this stuff. I'm really getting good at it now. And that's really the mentality you have. So I think if there are things that you're not really passionate about, and it doesn't support your core, it probably doesn't make sense to get into it. We got a few more minutes left, and I obviously won't be able to hit all these things, but and I'll kind of wrap up on a few lessons learned at the end. You know,
And
real
we
estate.
do have one question
Okay,
in the chat question. It's in the chat. What are your thoughts on joining a skincare company to become their flagship location and bridge the personal spa with skincare company?
Okay, so say that again. What are my thoughts about
joining a skincare company to become their flagship location and bridge a personal spa with the skincare company? Excuse me.
thoughts of joining a skincare company? So I'd have to, first of all, you got to get yourself a healthcare attorney, because, you know, skincare companies can't practice medicine. You know, and you'll see, by the way, no one is really looking out for the physician. We all know Lifestyle Lift, right? We know some of these other organizations that have tried to, quote, hire physicians. So depending on the state, actually not depending on state, it's considered, you know, revenue sharing with a non-physician. A hospital, by the way, can hire you, and another physician group can hire you, but a skincare company, again, depending on the state, I probably cannot legitimately hire you, and unless they've got a medical service organization or something that they're overseeing. Again, I don't give advice, but I'll tell you what I do, and history repeats itself. Those who went down that road, to me, then in the area of the Lifestyle Lift, never developed themselves as a world-class, reputable type go-to physician in their community. And a lot of people thought, I mean, if someone's saying, look, I just want to throw the towel in, I'm done. I don't want to manage anything. I just want to work there. And I'm willing to take, you know, whatever the number is, a couple $100,000 a year, 3, 4, whatever the number is, to be the medical director of the flagship location. Then, you know, that's, I guess, if that's what someone wants for themselves, you realize there's a premium for paying, you know, that you're paying for that. Somebody else is taking the risk, which means they're going to expect a profit on you somewhere along the lines. And, you know, that may be, and I'm not worried about people making money on me. I'm worried, for me, I want to control my future, and I want to control my destiny. And when I decide to you know, take off time and that type of thing, I think that if you could, for example, I know, and I don't want to throw names out there, but I know a couple of my colleagues who have done such a thing in different companies, and they've never really been able to develop a name as a facial plastic surgeon or a plastic surgeon outside that company. It wasn't like, because I know people that say, well, I'm going to do it for a period of time until I build my reputation doing the Lifestyle Lift, and that never really happens. So I guess if the question is, what are my thoughts as far as joining a skincare company and helping, you know, bridge in the area, crossing over the skincare into practice, if the job is what you want, as a medical director and overseeing it, they can actually pay you that way, and that's legitimate, and that may make you happy. I guess the question really comes down to what are your goals? You know, what are you looking to accomplish out of it? Is it just an income and a steady job? Because if it is, then it's probably a good decision. You know, not having to take really any risk, going to work every day and enjoying what you have. If you aspire to something more than that, then probably is not, you know, the ideal scenario for the entrepreneur business person. So I've had, with one exception, I've had people who've joined multi-specialty groups with a real clear goal in mind, and that is they say, I have medical school debt, I have a family, I got to pay it off. I'm going to take this job for 3 to 5 years, pay off my debt, and then and then I'm gonna move on and do my own thing. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of my thoughts. And again, it was, I didn't get enough detail to really expand upon it much more. We're kind of running out of time. I was going to talk about, real estate. I grew up in a real estate family, and I've had some wins and losses there. And probably the best thing, I'll give you just the pearl. If you are going to be in practice for 10 years or more, and you're going to be a tenant-driven situation, it really makes good sense for people to own their own real estate. If you are a business that's growing and expanding, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And there are real estate for most physicians doesn't make good business sense. And I've had no fewer than 30 pieces of real estate because they all take work. And if you don't just love it, they'll take a lot of work. There's no such thing as getting rich quick. And a couple just pearls, you make money in real estate the day you buy it, which means you cannot overpay, because it takes 6 to 7 years to recoup, closing costs and points and fees and that type of thing. Location is always true, because in real estate, you make money on appreciation, the value going up, adding value, what some people call, sweat equity. In other words, you take something, add value to it, and it's worth 1 and 1 is 3. Cash flow, if you get to a point where you've got tenants and you're at least in the positive, and then you can have a spread on your capital gains or what you're making at the end, back end by depreciation. But for most physicians, owning a lot of real estate doesn't make good sense, including a big home. Anything that's too big is probably not a great investment, because you got carrying costs, you got maintenance, you got all these other things. Unless, of course, you say, I don't care, I want to, and I do. I have a beautiful home, because to me, that's important. That's my guilty pleasure. I'd rather have that than a bunch of other junk. So I probably should wrap up here. I can talk about incorporate it onto another call or podcast on, adding technology. What are our rules of thumb for adding technology? So the next podcast is going to be developing yourself as a business person, the leadership imperative, why it is so critical to learn business, not to just and become a better leader. And that sounds like so cliched and so straightforward and so easy, but so to me is the number one most important thing if you're looking to scale up and get big. And even if you're not looking to scale up, you're looking to have 4 or 5. And if you're a better leader, you're going to waste a lot less time doing things correctly than constantly reinventing a wheel or meeting with staff late in the evening and that type of thing. Are there any other housekeeping items, Lila, that I need to touch base on?
We had one more question. We can either get it this week or next week. Your thoughts on expanding non-surgical services through PA injectors in skincare?
I'm a big fan. I mean, I don't think it matters whether it's a PA or an MD or a nurse practitioner or a registered nurse, but I'm a huge fan of scaling up. And I think that surgeons who don't do it and feel like they have to do all of that are missing out. Like I said, our entity here, I haven't injected a patient in 10 years. We're in the top 1% in the country in Botox used. We do huge volume, and it is our primary care network. It's where we build relationships with our patients. Skincare happens to be a very small part of it, but I absolutely subscribe to that. There's a whole way that we do that, and maybe I should talk about it in one call, because the biggest challenge I hear, the pain point from our docs and colleagues, is how do I do that without having them, teaching them and training them, and then they go across town and compete. We're very, very blessed that the people we have been with us for years. I think a lot of it is that we've structured things right. We take really good care of them. We have an amazing team. and people don't typically leave just over dollars and cents. So I think a lot of that, the challenge, and this maybe will be the nugget or the pearl that I see when I've looked and kind of mentored and guided some of my colleagues, is that their structure isn't correct. 70% of people leave a job over frustration. So what a shame when you have an amazing injector and they go across town and compete with you. But I absolutely positively think that anyone who is serious about this should seriously look at, how do I scale up nurse injectors, nurse practitioner, whatever, MD injectors, so that I can leverage my time becoming a better leader and growing the business. So yeah, that's my answer. First of all, I want to thank Aqua Marketing for the aesthetic water cooler. I also want to thank everyone who's taken the time to listen to this. I mean, I really appreciate the following that we're growing here. And if there's anyone that you think might benefit from some of this information, and keep the questions coming, and I also want criticism. If there's something you don't like, so I know I speak fast, but I'm trying to cover a lot of material, and I want to keep everybody's attention. So if there's certain things that you really want, let me know. All right, I think that's it, Lila. Hope you guys have an awesome month, and I'll talk to you next month on the 25th.